Good day there, once again viewers, your mate AG7 here, coming to you guys with some more Planetside 2 content. Today guys, we're going to be kicking off our reviews of the new Empire-specific SMGs with my home faction, the NC, and their new weapon, the MGR-S1 Gladius. In this review, we'll be taking a look at some of the statistics of the weapon, and the attachment options to see what kind of playstyle this thing falls into, all the while discussing some tips and tricks for making the most of the weapon in the field. Now, I know that not all of you have the opportunity to sit back and watch a 10-minute plus review on a single weapon in a video game. So for all of those who are a little short on time, let's do a quick TLDR overview of the weapon. If the NC were to ever craft an SMG that just felt like NC all over, it would be the Gladius. Its 200 damage profile is downright punishing in close quarters combat, but its harsh damage drop-off makes the weapon less than ideal for medium to long range firefighting. With that in mind, the recoil on this weapon isn't too difficult to control, so if you do get caught out in those long range firefights, not all is lost. With the hefty damage output comes a sluggish rate of fire that leaves a little margin for error even when in the CQC firefighting, meaning that precision with this weapon is paramount to your success. Considering the weapon's less than ideal cone of fire when firing from the hip, focusing on aiming down sights whenever possible will ensure that you get the most out of this weapon when you need it the most. Now, that there is basically a TLDR of the powerhouse that is the Gladius, but I can tell that some of you came here for more, so let's get into the statistics of the weapon and start crunching some numbers. The MGR-S1 Gladius will run you a total of 1000 certs to unlock for a single NC enlistment, or a total of 699 Daybreak coin to unlock for all of your current and future NC characters. Now, the question of which currency do I use to unlock this weapon is entirely dependent on how many NC characters you play across different servers. I will say that if you do have multiple characters, or think you may do in the future, then unlocking this weapon with Daybreak coin is certainly worth it, as this gives you another weapon to use across all of your classes as opposed to just one on all of your characters. Unlocking this weapon with Daybreak coin also allows for you to invest quickly into the attachments for this weapon, which is a nice bonus, but if you are already swimming in certs, then this shouldn't bother you in the slightest. When it comes to the damage model, the Gladius brings the signature NC heavy hitting damage model to the party, rocking 200 maximum at the 6 meter mark, dropping off to a minimum damage of 112 at the 50 meter mark. Now this right here makes for a bittersweet damage profile. Sure, up close this thing is as deadly as it gets, taking only 5 shots to score a kill. However, this weapon drops a total of 4 damage tiers, taking 6 shots to kill a target within the 11 to 25 meter range, 7 shots to kill a target within 26 to 35 meters, 8 shots to kill a target within 36 to 44 meters, all the way down to 9 shots to score a kill at the 45 plus meter mark. Now, when we take those damage numbers and put them against the rate of fire of 522 rounds per minute, or 8.7 rounds per second, we get a theoretical time to kill of 0.46 seconds at the 6 meter mark, 0.575 seconds at the 22 meter mark, 0.69 seconds at the 34 meter mark, 0.805 seconds at the 43 meter mark, and 0.92 seconds at the minimum damage range of 50 meters. So, yeah. As we can see here, the minimum damage of the weapon begins to hurt just a little bit as things get stretched out to longer ranges. Jumping to the recoil side of things here for this weapon, much like the damage profile, we're dealing with a little bit of a bittersweet profile here. For those who aren't interested in the exact numbers and theory behind the recoil, the Gladius comes with a moderate vertical kick with an erratic horizontal deviation that will make you feel like you're firing the weapon mid-earthquake, as if the screen shake in this game wasn't enough. On top of that, the weapon has a right-hand side bias that will see it kicking upwards and to the right, which may seem bad on paper, but it actually adds a little bit of consistency to the already erratic horizontal shift in the weapon. Now, for those of you who are interested in the exact numbers, the weapon features a vertical kick of 0.24 degrees per shot, which is 0.06 degrees less than the Cyclone. So if you use the Cyclone a lot, then this weapon's vertical kick isn't going to feel as punishing just by a smidge. The first shot multiplier is 1.6 times, giving you an effective vertical kick of 0.384 degrees every time you initiate a burst. Now, as for the horizontal recoil, the weapon comes with a horizontal recoil shift of 0.22 degrees minimum and 0.35 degrees maximum with a 0.5 degrees horizontal tolerance. So basically what this means in practice is that the weapon has the ability to kick once or twice horizontally in the same direction depending on how intense the horizontal shift is within the minimum and maximum values before being forced back in the opposite direction by the horizontal tolerance, which means that as a result you're going to be dealing with a fairly sporadic weapon that is going to kick fairly inconsistently in a horizontal manner. The only consistent part about this weapon's horizontal recoil is the angle of 12 degrees to the right, meaning that the recoil will kick on a right hand angle regardless of the horizontal shake. And of course, for those who are interested, you can also find the cone of fire stats listed on the right hand side of the screen. There is no way I'm going over all of them in this video, so take note as you please. When it comes to the ammo related stats of the Gladius, it features a 28 round magazine with 168 rounds in the reserves, a short reload time of 2 seconds and a long reload time of 3 seconds. Wrapping up the weapon into the nice little package that it is, you have the muzzle velocity of 400 meters per second and an aiming down sights movement multiplier of 0.75 times. So that right there, guys, is the stats of the Gladius, and it should hopefully give you a full-fledged idea as to how this weapon actually behaves. However, I think it's fairly safe to say that overall, the weapon on paper may come across as a little bit confused. Most weapons that feature a high damage per round profile are stereotypically designed for long-range combat, but not the Gladius. It's clear that with the erratic recoil, the major damage drop-off, and the fairly spastic cone of fire for an SMG, that this thing is simply not designed to be used at long-range firefights. While the very inviting first shot multiplier makes bursting the weapon an option for such long-range firefights, its damage output while you are bursting at such ranges just makes for a very lackluster damage output that will see you being outgunned in most situations. Instead, this is a weapon that rewards you for awesome crosshair placement in close quarters combat, punishes you big time for missing a few shots here and there. Considering that this is the slowest firing SMG of the NC arsenal, and quite possibly in the game for that matter, missing shots when in close quarters combat is going to put you at a massive disadvantage when versing weapons that are a lot faster firing. So in order to make the most of the 200 damage per round profile, the accuracy needs to be on point. If you can chain headshots at close quarters combat, then this thing will bring enemies down in record times, but only if you can remain accurate. And with that in mind, I would definitely recommend ADSing whenever possible with this weapon. Sure, when it comes to most SMGs you can get away with hip firing in close quarters combat, but considering the less than ideal hip fire, cone of fire and slow rate of fire, the risk is just too great with this weapon, as there's a lot of room for you to miss shots completely and lose a straight up firefight because of it. You can negate some of this with the advanced laser sight, but I wouldn't even bother at that point. For 200 certs, you're only going to be cutting a third of the cone of fire off the weapon, and even then, the risk is just too great that we'll see you coming out of firefights with close shaves when you really should have just been winning outright with no competition. Stick to what this weapon is good for, aiming down sights. And speaking of sticking to what the weapon is good for, let's talk about magazine size and how it dictates how you should really be using this weapon. By comparison to the AF4 Cyclone, by default, it comes with a slightly more generous 28 round magazine, which is, well, 3 rounds more than the Cyclone, but even then, taking on board a guerrilla warfare style of gameplay, much like how you should with the Cyclone, is critical to success here. Sure, while the weapon is capable of dealing with multiple unsuspecting targets in quick succession if you land your shots accurately, it doesn't have the magazine size and the rate of fire to do crowd control. Always focus on singling out targets that separate themselves from groups, and always have an escape route for when you quickly finish off your target. Be quick, be adaptable, and never get bogged down against multiple targets at once, as this SMG doesn't feature the magazine capacity for that type of gameplay. It just simply doesn't have the magazine size, the rate of fire, and the crowd control functionalities to take on multiple targets at once. With the slightly slower reload time offered by this weapon over the AF4 Cyclone, I cannot stress having a place to retreat to in mind at all times enough. Sure, it's only a 0.145 seconds slower than the Cyclone, but every little bit it counts in close quarters combat and you don't when you get caught with your pants down, or in this case with your magazines out. So with all that in mind, we know that the weapon is a guerrilla warfare style of weapon that requires a lot of accuracy to use. So let's start looking at some attachment options for the weapon and see how we can improve the weapon for the better. As far as the Gladius is concerned, it comes with a 1x through the 3.4x optics, including a 1x RMV sights, the hybrid suppressor, a brand new attachment available to the new line of Empire specific SMGs, the dark light flashlight, an advanced laser sight, the forward grip, soft point ammunition, and the SPWR ammunition, a unique attachment available to the Gladius. Now, considering that we really want to improve this weapon from a close quarters standpoint, a personal recommendation from me is that as soon as you buy this weapon, buy a 1x sight for it. Anything beyond that from a magnification standpoint is just really going to be overkill for where you should be using the weapon in the first place. And as you guys know, when it comes to attachments, I'm of the opinion that you should be improving the weapon's strong suits as opposed to attempting to cancel out its weaknesses. And while this weapon doesn't have the worst iron sights in the world, as we emphasized before, crosshair placement with this weapon is key, so having that 1x reflex sight is going to help you improve said crosshair placement. And on the topic of improving strong suits as opposed to cancelling out weaknesses, this is why I recommend grabbing the forward grip over the advanced laser sight, because as I said before, the laser sight just doesn't make enough of an impact to justify using the hip fire consistently, so save yourself 100 certs and just stick to the forward grip. As far as ammunition goes, this is a tough one, and for me, it entirely depends on whether you mount a hybrid suppressor or not. The hybrid suppressor, while is great for turning your Gladius into a stealthy badass, reduces the muzzle velocity all the way down to a pitiful 200 meters per second. That is snail speed. The SPWR ammunition, to my mind, cancels out said issue as it brings 50% more muzzle velocity to the weapon, whereas having an extra 5% worth of muzzle velocity shed from your weapon from the soft point ammunition on top of the hybrid suppressor's effect makes for some painful engagements on your end. Even in close quarters, you will find yourself having to lead targets that are moving perpendicular to you. With that said, the soft point adds extra range to the maximum damage range, which is also critical for this weapon, so it mainly comes down to whether you decide to mount a suppressor on the weapon or not, to which I will add I've had a lot of fun with. So if you decide to mount a suppressor, go with the SPWR ammunition. If you're not mounting a suppressor, the soft point ammunition will serve you greatly. And folks, on that note, that kind of wraps up everything that I wanted to talk about in relation to the MGR-S1 Gladius. Guys, if you find yourself enjoying this gameplay, or if you found yourself learning something new about the weapon, say you're buying the weapon right now as we speak, as a result of this review, or say you're turning yourself away from it because, hey, it doesn't sound like the weapon for you, a backhanding of that like button would be greatly appreciated. And say you guys have any input for this weapon, say you've been using it, you've got some tips and tricks, then feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below sharing some tips and tricks that I may have forgotten to have mentioned in this video about the Gladius in the comment section down below. If you guys find yourself backhanding that like button and you're new to the channel, backhand that subscribe button whilst you're at it. And as per always guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Have a good one.